All eyes turned to Judge Miller when he announced the ruling. Custody of the children is hereby granted to Mr. Daniel Collins. Emma froze in her chair. Her hands gripped the armrest so tightly her knuckles turned white. Tears blurred her vision, but she fought to keep them from falling. Across the aisle, Daniel leaned back, arms folded, expression calm and satisfied. His attorney's grin made it clear. They had expected this outcome. Emma's lawyer whispered, "We can appeal, but it will be another war." She didn't answer, her throat locked. From the gallery, a murmur spread. She lost because of one sentence. The phrase darted around the room, repeated in disbelief. Just one sentence. Could it really erase years of late nights, sick days, and bedtime stories? Emma's tears finally fell. She turned to Daniel. He didn't look at her. To him, this wasn't just divorce. It was conquest. Her chest ached as she remembered Lily's drawings on the fridge, the crooked sun above 3 smiling stick figures holding hands. She remembered Daniel's promise on their wedding night. "I'll build us a life no storm can shake." Now the storm had swallowed her whole. Emma Reynolds was an elementary school teacher. She never sought luxury, only a stable family, mornings filled with her daughter's chatter, evenings around the dinner table. To her students, she was gentle and patient. To her friends, a sincere woman who often gave too much of herself. Her daily routine was simple. Wake early, prepare breakfast, take Lily to school, then spend the day guiding her class through numbers and words. To the children, she was a silent hero. To Lily, she was the center of the world. The man she once trusted was Daniel Collins, a real estate businessman. Always in a press suit, phone in hand, he moved from meeting to meeting, contract to contract. Outwardly, he was the model of success, confident, polished, admired. At parties, he was the center of attention, the man whose smile disarmed everyone in the room. On their wedding day, Daniel whispered in her ear, "I'll build us a life no storm can shake." For a while, the promise seemed real. Mornings smelled of coffee. Afternoons meant school pickups. Evenings sometimes ended with the 3 of them on the sofa watching cartoons. To neighbors, they looked like the golden couple. Gentle wife, successful husband, beautiful daughter. But inside, Emma now sat in a courtroom, stripped of her children by a single verdict, left wondering how laughter and vows had turned into weapons in a war she never thought she would fight. But hidden behind that picture were quiet differences. Emma was used to simplicity and small things, while Daniel was increasingly fascinated by the halo, money, and outside relationships. The cozy dinners at the dinner table gradually disappeared, replaced by work calls that lasted until late at night. Emma still tried to keep the home warm with love and patience, but she began to realize that this roof was no longer a place where both of them looked in the same direction. In the early years, their marriage was truly a dream. The small house echoed with the laughter of their daughter Lily, the crystallization of love and hope. Emma still clearly remembers Lily's 3rd birthday, and Dan. The room was filled with flickering candles. Daniel held his daughter in his arms, and Emma laughed and sang with everyone. In that moment, she believed that love could overcome all difficulties. However, no dream lasts forever. The sweetness of the past gradually gave way to simmering conflicts. At first, it was just Daniel's careless words when he was tired. "You never did anything for this family." Emma initially thought it was just a word spoken in anger, but gradually that sentence repeated itself over and over again like an invisible knife cutting into her heart. During the day, the neighbors often saw Daniel walking out of the house in a neat suit, shiny shoes, and a phone to his ear. They smiled and whispered, "Daniel is a model husband, working hard and taking care of his wife and children." In the eyes of outsiders, Emma was lucky. A successful man, a complete family. Everyone admired him. Some even joked, "Emma is really lucky." But they didn't know that when the door closed, the truth was completely different. It was Emma who was sitting at the dining table, checking each electricity, water, and mortgage bill, managing to make sure her meager teacher's salary was enough to cover expenses. She stayed up all night preparing lessons, printing materials for her students, and watching over her daughter who was in her room with a fever. Meanwhile, Daniel often came home late, smelling of alcohol and strange perfume, and passed by his wife and children as if they were just shadows. The image of the perfect husband that society saw was just a shiny mask. Underneath, there was a cold truth that only Emma had to face every day. Then Daniel came home late more and more often. "I have to go out to entertain clients," he said, but the cold gaze and the faint scent of strange perfume on his shirt did not give Emma a sense of security. She began to realize the distance between the two of them was growing, like an underground river silently eroding trust. Emma still clearly remembered the wedding night, when the two of them sat by the hotel window, the city lights spread out below. Daniel held her hand, looked straight into her eyes, and said sincerely, "Emma, you are the best thing that has ever happened to me." Those words made her cry, believing that love could protect her for life. But just a few years later, everything changed. During an argument, Daniel stood in the middle of the living room, pointed straight at Emma, his voice cold. "If it weren't for me, you'd be nothing." Those words hit Emma's ears like a hammer blow. The same person, the same voice, but the words had changed from love to humiliation. Emma was stunned to realize the man who had promised to build her a home as strong as a fortress was now the one who destroyed it brick by brick. The most obvious witness to the broken marriage was Lily, a 7-year-old girl, innocent and pure. Every time her parents argued, Lily would sit in the corner, scribbling family pictures. In the pictures, her parents were still holding hands, smiling under the distorted but bright sunlight. Emma looked at those drawings, both loving and pitying, wondering if her daughter could feel the darkness that was covering the small house. The only person Emma could confide in was Jessica, her best friend from college. One evening, when Emma cried silently in the kitchen, Jessica held her friend's hand and sighed. "Emma, see, love shouldn't feel like a battlefield every night." That sentence was like a wake-up call, but Emma still clung to the fragile belief that Daniel was just under pressure from work, that love would return to the way it was before. One winter evening, Jessica, Emma's best friend, happened to pass by a bar in the city center. Amidst the dim lights and the loud music, she was stunned when she saw Daniel. He was sitting in a hidden corner, his arm loosely draped over a strange young woman's shoulder, his eyes full of affection, his mouth smiling and whispering something that made the other person giggle. It was not the stern look of a husband, a father, but an undeniable intimacy. The next day, Jessica arranged to meet Emma at a familiar coffee shop. She hesitated for a long time before saying, "Me." "Emma, yesterday I saw Daniel with a woman at the bar. They looked very intimate." Emma looked up, her eyes flashing with confusion, then quickly lowered. She shook her head, her voice trembling but determined. "He wouldn't do that. You must be mistaken or just misunderstood something." Jessica squeezed her friend's hand, but Emma pulled her hand back, smiling awkwardly to end the story. That night, lying next to Daniel, Emma glanced at him. Daniel slept soundly, his face calm as if nothing had happened. She whispered to herself, "Oh, I trust him. I have to trust." But deep down, Emma knew that trust had begun to crack. And the tragedy was, she had tried to patch up those cracks with her own naivety and illusion. However, the cruel truth did not wait for her to prepare. At a neighborhood party, Daniel once put his arm around Emma's shoulder, smiled proudly, and loudly declared to the crowd, "This woman is the reason I succeed." Everyone applauded. Admiring eyes were on Emma. She felt loved, cherished. But just a few years later, Emma accidentally received a video from an anonymous account. Her heart stopped when she saw Daniel's image. The same smile, the same words, but the subject was not her, but another woman, young and attractive. He hugged the woman's waist, repeating each familiar word like a rehearsed script. "This woman is the reason I succeed." Emma sat silently in front of the screen, her mind spinning. In an instant, the image of the perfect husband collapsed, revealing a blatant traitor. That night, the house was plunged into silence. The wall clock struck 11. Each ticking sound was so clear it hurt her ears. Emma sat alone at Lily's small desk, the yellow light shining on her red, swollen eyes from crying. "What?" On the desk, her child's exercise book was still open, with the childish, neat handwriting of, "I love you, Mommy." While packing her child's school bag, Emma's fingers suddenly touched a neatly folded piece of paper tucked inside a sketchbook. She opened it, and her heart burst when she saw the childish, slightly crooked handwriting. "Mommy, you are my sunshine." Beside it was a distorted round sun shining with sparkling rays in yellow crayon. Emma sat silently for a long time, tears welling up uncontrollably. In the moment when the whole world seemed to turn its back on her, when her husband, who had promised to protect her, now left only coldness and sarcasm, this tiny piece of paper became a life buoy. She gently pressed the piece of paper to her chest, whispering as if talking to her daughter, even though Lily was already asleep in the next room. "If I were still your light, I would not let this darkness swallow us." That night, Emma realized the love of a child was the fragile thread that kept her standing firm in the storm of marriage. At first, Emma just happened to see a file to left on Daniel's desk. Inside were the ownership papers of a newly built apartment, under his name alone. When she asked, Daniel calmly replied, his voice both urgent and annoyed, "Sigh. It's just an investment for our future. Don't overthink." Emma was silent, but her heart was in turmoil. They'd agreed to discuss every investment together before, but this time, he hid it. A few weeks later, the credit card bill sent home left Emma speechless. A series of strange expenses appeared. Luxury fashion stores, high-end perfume brands, designer shoes. She looked at herself. Simple shirts, worn-out shoes, not having received an expensive gift from her husband for years. Emma took the bill, walked over to Daniel. He glanced at it and smiled faintly. "Business expenses. You wouldn't understand. Mice." The answer was concise and cold, closing all doubts. But that indifference made Emma even more uneasy. She began to wonder, were these expenses not for the family? Was the apartment under her own name just part of a bigger picture that Daniel was trying to hide? In the quiet kitchen, Emma sat alone with a stack of bills spread out on the table, her heart trembling. The smell of financial intrigue crept into every number, every line, like a ghost that heralded a storm that had yet to be named. In the late afternoon, pale yellow sunlight streamed through the living room window. Emma sat down next to Lily, placing her hand gently on her soft hair. She smiled, trying to dispel the fatigue after a long day. "Lily, can we go to the park this weekend? I'll buy you strawberry ice cream." Lily looked up at her mother with clear eyes, hesitated for a moment, then shook her head slightly. Her voice was as small as a breeze, but was enough to pierce Emma's heart. "Daddy said you'll leave us one day." Emma was stunned. Her heart clenched. Her hand unconsciously dropped the hairpin she was pinning for her child. Lily's eyes were still innocent, not understanding that her words were like a knife cutting deep into her mother's heart. You heard what Dad said?" Emma asked softly, her voice trembling. Lily nodded, then bent down to continue drawing a picture of the family of three holding hands under the sun. To her, it was just a repeated sentence, nothing more, nothing less. But to Emma, it was clear evidence that Daniel had sown darkness into the child's mind. In that moment, Emma felt like she had not only lost the husband who had promised to protect her, but also gradually lost her place in her daughter's heart, all because of the poisonous words spoken behind her back. The rift never comes in a single moment. It usually starts with a small crack, and over time, it gradually grows into an abyss. For Emma, the moment that started the abyss was an email that happened to appear on her computer screen. That night, Daniel forgot to lock his laptop before leaving home. While cleaning the living room, Emma accidentally saw the open mailbox. The words appeared on the screen like a cold knife. "Wish you were here instead of her." The recipient was a young woman Emma had never heard of. Her chest tightened, her eyes blurred. All the years of trust she had tried to maintain suddenly shattered like glass falling to the tile floor. Emma closed the computer, trembling as she walked into the room, looking at Daniel sleeping soundly. His face was calm, without a ripple. As for her heart was broken. But that was only the beginning. A series of events followed, rushing like a storm. Late at night, the house was quiet, except for the steady ticking of the wall clock. Emma had just laid down on the bed when the phone suddenly rang, piercing the night. She was startled, looking at Daniel. He was still lying on his back, breathing evenly as if he was in a deep sleep. The phone rang repeatedly, the screen showing an unknown number. Emma hesitated for a few seconds, then shakily picked up the phone. On the other end of the line, a woman's voice whispered softly, tense and hurried. "You don't know what your husband's been doing with your money." Emma sat up, her heart pounding. She hurriedly asked, "Who is it? What did you say?" "What do you mean?" But the only response was a cold click. The call was immediately disconnected. There was no further explanation. Emma stared at the screen, her hands still shaking. The unknown number could not be called back, as if it had never existed. In the bedroom, Daniel turned over, mumbling something in his sleep, completely unaware that his wife was trembling beside him. Emma pressed the phone to her chest, feeling as if her heart was about to jump out. The whisper kept echoing in her head. "You don't know what your husband's been doing with your money." Who was that woman? A stranger who happened to know the story? Or one of Daniel's others? She sat motionless in the dark for a long time, a series of unanswered questions appearing in her head. That short sentence was like a sharp needle stabbing straight into her heart, making Emma feel like she had just touched a part of a much larger secret curtain. And for the first time, Emma was overwhelmed by the thought. Perhaps Daniel had not only betrayed her love, but was also hiding a financial sin that she had never imagined. One night, Emma checked her bank account to pay the electricity bill. She was shocked to discover that all the money in the joint account had been withdrawn. The balance was only a few odd numbers. When she asked Daniel, he just shrugged. "I invest. Don't worry about things you don't understand." Emma was silent, but a vague uneasiness arose in her heart. A few days later, when cleaning out Daniel's desk drawer, Emma found a stack of transfer papers. The ownership of the house they were living in had been transferred to Daniel's real estate company. She was stunned. The house, the place that held so many memories, the place where her daughter grew up, no longer belonged to the family. At the same time, rumors from the neighbors began to creep in. Daniel often appeared with a young woman in the city center. Emma tried to reassure herself, but then the fatal blow came from her daughter. On Saturday afternoon, Emma stopped by the supermarket near her house, the basket in her hand filled with familiar items. A carton of milk for Lily, some green vegetables, a package of cereal that Daniel often ate for breakfast. She was tired, but still tried to keep a slight smile, as a way to reassure herself that family life was still normal. When she turned into the spice aisle, Emma caught sight of Mark, an old colleague of Daniel's who used to come to their house for weekend BBQs. Mark used to like Emma. Every time he met her, he would ask about Willie and tell funny stories about work. But this time, just catching a glimpse of Emma, Mark paused. His eyes swept over her, and then he quickly turned away, pulling the cart to another aisle. "Mark!" Emma called after him, her voice still full of goodwill. Mark paused for a moment, then just nodded slightly, smiling awkwardly. "Hi, Emma, I'm in a hurry." "Good to see you." Then he turned and left, so fast that he was afraid someone would catch them talking. Emma stood frozen in the middle of the aisle, her heart aching. The shopping cart in her hand was heavy. She was shocked to realize something was spreading out there others knew, and she, the wife, the mother in that house, was the last one left in the dark. The feeling of betrayal suddenly doubled, not only from Daniel, but also from the world around her that was silently hiding the truth. She had been silent, hoping that everything was just a misunderstanding, but when she saw her innocent daughter repeating the cruel words, Emma understood that silence could no longer protect anyone. Late one night, Emma sat in the living room, the light from the phone screen shining on her haggard face. She scrolled through Daniel's personal page, where he often posted pictures of work, luxurious meetings, or a luxurious business trip. In a newly posted photo, at first glance there was nothing remarkable, just a glass of red wine placed on a wooden table, behind which was a scene of a high-class restaurant with warm yellow lights. The caption was short, "Late-night meeting. Outsiders would probably pass by without paying attention." But Emma, with the sensitive eyes of someone who was too familiar with every small detail, saw something that made her breath catch. Right next to the wine glass, a woman's hand was briefly visible, the ring finger sparkling with a slender ring, a style Emma had never seen before, definitely not hers. She enlarged the photo, her heart pounding. The ring shone under the light like a naked truth accidentally revealed. Emma bit her lip until it bled. While Daniel wore the guise of a work meeting, the photo whispered another truth. He was not alone. The photo was blurry, the caption innocuous, but to Emma, Chi was evidence of betrayal, a subtle, cold sign hidden in the flowery world of the internet. One weekend afternoon, while cleaning out the filing cabinet, Emma accidentally found the savings book that the couple had set up for Lily since she was born. It was the small amount of money they had saved every month, with a simple promise. "Later, you will have capital to go to university, to pursue your dreams." Emma opened the cabinet, rummaged through each file, but the book was gone. Her heart sank. She quickly called Daniel. When she confronted him, he just shrugged, his voice coldly indifferent. "I moved to another place to make a profit." "Don't worry, I know what I'm doing." Emma was stunned. She asked for the documents, wanting to see the proof of where the money was. Daniel sighed. A half-smile appeared on his face as if she were a nuisance. "You don't need to worry. This is a man's business. A business. You don't understand." That sentence not only extinguished Emma's doubts, but also seemed to sweep away all the rights of a mother. Her hands trembled, remembering the image of Lily carefully stuffing each lucky money into the small piggy bank. Her eyes lit up when Emma promised, "This is for your dream." Now, that dream had evaporated, along with the savings book, without a trace, without a commitment. Emma clearly felt Daniel not only took away her trust, but also deprived her daughter of her future. On a gloomy evening, Emma burst into tears in Jessica's arms. Her best friend hugged her tightly, her voice firm. "Emma, if you stay silent, he will erase you from this life." Emma wiped her tears, her lips trembling, but her eyes lit up with an unprecedented determination. "Then I'll fight. For Lily, I have to." That night, the kitchen was immersed in a pale yellow light. Emma stood by the dining table, holding a stack of bills, her voice trembling but determined. "Daniel, I took all the money in the account and Lily's savings book. You have the right to know where they are." Daniel stepped closer, his shadow falling long over his wife. His face was calm, but his eyes flashed with an unpredictable coldness. He placed his hands on the table, leaned down close to Emma. His voice lowered like a sharpened knife. "If you try to fight me, you'll lose more than just this marriage." Emma paused, goosebumps all over her body. That sentence did not need to be shouted, did not need to be angry. It was like a verdict, cold and calculating. In that moment, Emma felt as if the familiar room had suddenly become a prison, and her husband before her was an invisible guard, threatening her every escape. She clenched the papers in her hands, feeling her heart pounding in her chest. Fear surged, but with it, a smoldering fire began to burn. If she did not fight back, Daniel would destroy not only their marriage, but Lily's future as well. A week later, Emma received an anonymous envelope on her doorstep. Inside was a photo of Daniel with his arm around a young woman outside a hotel, along with a handwritten note that read, "If you want the truth, ask him about the condo in Miami." Emma held the photo, her hands shaking. Her heart was pounding in her chest. This was no longer suspicion or rumor. This was clear evidence. Daniel was not only having an affair, but also a well-hidden financial secret. A condo in Miami? A secret investment? Or a refuge for a parallel life? That night, Emma sat alone in the dark kitchen, bills and papers strewn across the table. The ticking of the clock sounded like a countdown. She knew that if she didn't act, she would lose everything. Her daughter, her house, her reputation. Emma rose from her grief. In the mirror, her face was streaked with tears, but her eyes were ablaze with determination. That night, Emma sat alone at the kitchen table, the anonymous envelope placed before her. Her hand shook as she pulled out all the papers inside. In addition to the photo of Daniel hugging a young woman in front of a hotel, indisputable evidence of his affair, there was also a crumpled stack of photocopies. Emma flipped through the pages. Her heart stopped when she realized it was a contract to buy an apartment in Miami. Daniel's signature was clearly visible at the bottom of the page, a strong, familiar handwriting that made her cringe. She was stunned, but that was not all that left Emma speechless. Next to Daniel's signature was another name, Sofia Alvarez, the co-owner. The co-owner. A name Emma had never heard, never seen in any relationship Daniel had ever mentioned. The apartment was shared with a strange woman? Emma dropped the stack of papers on the table, her hands gripping the wooden edge so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Before her eyes, the image of a perfect family that Daniel had always shown to society was completely shattered. Adultery was enough to destroy a marriage, but now the truth also showed that Daniel had built a parallel life with assets and secrets that Emma had never known. A series of questions rang through her head. Who was Sophia? Just a lover? Or a link in some dark financial conspiracy? And most importantly, the family's money, Lily's savings, had disappeared into whose hands? Emma put her head down on the table, tears falling freely, but in her blurred eyes flashed a strong light. She knew that silence could no longer protect anyone. The day Emma decided to see a lawyer, it was a gray rain. She sat in a dark wooden office, opposite Michael Grant, a 45-year-old lawyer, experienced, with silver hair and sharp eyes. On the desk, files were stacked high, giving off the smell of old paper and strong coffee. Emma went to Michael Grant on a rainy afternoon. Tea! His law office was located in an old building in the city center. The dark wooden door had his name engraved in simple bronze letters. Michael Grant, family law attorney. Michael was 45 years old, famous as an experienced lawyer in divorce and child custody disputes. He was not the flashy lawyer who appeared in the media, but someone who always chose to fight quietly in the courtroom, letting the evidence and arguments speak for him. People still say, if you are betting your life on a divorce, Grant is the only name you should look for. Emma came to Michael not because of his fame, but because of Jessica's introduction. One desperate evening, Emma choked up and called her best friend. I'm about to lose everything, Jess. And Lily, too. Jessica took her hand and said firmly, I know someone. He helped my sister in her seemingly unwinnable divorce. Emma, you need a real fighter. When she first met Michael, Emma was almost speechless. She trembled as she handed over the envelope of photos and the messy pile of paper she'd collected. Michael watched silently, then took off his glasses and leaned his hands on the table. There was understanding mixed with seriousness in his eyes. Custody battles are wars fought with evidence, not tears, he said, his voice slow but firm. If you really want to win Lily back, I'll go all the way with you. But remember, I don't take every case. I only stand up for people I believe are being treated unfairly. Emma looked up, surprised. Michael did not ask how much money she had, nor did he rush to calculate the lawyer's fees. He only added, his eyes softening slightly, Years ago, I saw a mother lose custody of her child because no one was protecting her properly. It was a wound I will never forget. I do not want history to repeat itself with you. In that moment, Emma understood why Michael agreed to take her case. Not for fame or profit, but because deep down, he carried a debt of conscience, and Emma, with teary but determined eyes, made him decide to stand with her in the fierce battle ahead. Michael looked straight at Emma, his voice firm. Custody battles are wars fought with evidence, not tears. If you want to win Lily back, we must have irrefutable evidence. Emma nodded, clutching her handbag tightly on her lap. She knew that from now on, all tears would have to be hidden, replaced by documents, witnesses who could turn the scales of justice. But the road to court was never smooth. Tow! The first obstacle came from the maid who had been with the family for many years. At first, she was willing to take Emma's side, saying that Daniel often left his daughter alone at home to entertain guests. But just a week later, when Michael called back, she was confused. Sorry, I remember wrong. Actually, Daniel still takes care of Lily. Emma was stunned. Just a glance was enough to understand. Daniel had bribed, and a valuable witness had disappeared. In the initial witness list that Michael drafted, there was the name of Alex Turner, a mutual friend of both husband and wife. Alex used to be close to Emma, YTATOR, often sitting at their family dinner table laughing with Lily, even saying, "Ha ha, Emma, without you, Daniel would never have been able to keep this family together." Emma believed that Alex would support her, at least by telling her what he had witnessed. The nights Daniel had left, or the times Emma had been exhausted and still had to take care of the children alone. However, during a pre-trial preparation session, Michael returned with a heavy face. He put the file down on the table, sighed. Emma, Alex has changed his mind. He will testify, but he will stand by Daniel. Emma was stunned. She frowned. Her voice choked. No way, Alex said. He knew exactly what Daniel was like. Michael looked straight into her eyes, his voice low. Daniel promised Alex a lucrative real estate investment contract. And you know, loyalty is sometimes cheaper than money. The news was like a second stab to Emma. Shafter the maid turned her back. In her mind flashed images of Alex sitting in her kitchen laughing, teasing Lily to eat more vegetables. And yet now he was willing to deny everything just for a profit. That night, Emma sat by the window looking out at the dark street. She thought to herself, "Oh, if even my friends turn their backs on me, who am I left with?" She felt alone, as if the whole world was on Daniel's side, and she was just a small woman struggling in the darkness. But then, when she heard Lily laughing softly in her sleep, Emma clenched her hands. She whispered, "For you, I'll keep fighting, even if the whole world turns against me." One evening, Michael called Emma to his office, his face unusually heavy. He turned on the big screen, showing a video less than a minute long. In the video, Lily stood in front of the house crying, calling, "Mommy! Mommy!" and then crouched down on the steps. Emma's image flashed. "Oh!" She walked out the door, looked at the child, then turned back inside, slammed the door shut. Lily sat back, tears streaming down her face, looking pitiful. Emma opened her mouth, her whole body cold. She shook her head repeatedly, her voice breaking. "No, that's not what happened. I never left my child outside like that. I swear to you, Michael, it's fake." Michael still stared at the screen, then slowly took off his glasses, rubbed his forehead. He sighed, his voice heavy. "Fake evidence is still evidence, until we can prove otherwise. In the eyes of the court, this video is enough to destroy your reputation." Emma collapsed into a chair, tears rolling down. She remembered that day clearly. Lily was crying outside the door because she was angry that she couldn't go with her father. Emma had carried her into the house and comforted her for a long time until she stopped. But the video had been edited and edited, turning her into a heartless mother. In that moment, Emma understood that Daniel didn't just want to win. He was willing to use any means, even turning motherhood into a weapon against her. Then came the evidence of adultery. Emma trembled as she handed Michael the USB containing the photo of Daniel hugging the young woman in front of the hotel. But when Michael plugged it into his laptop, the screen went blank. No data remained. Emma panicked. But I swear, it was there. I saw it with my own eyes. Michael slammed the computer lid, his voice cold. "Someone doesn't want this case to see daylight." That statement made Emma shiver. This was no longer a prided battle between husband and wife. There was a hand behind him, silently clearing the way for Daniel, erasing all evidence. The courtroom mediation took place in a small room, the walls painted gray, the lights cold white. The lawyers from both sides sat there, but when the court staff left for a few minutes to collect more documents, the atmosphere became thick. Emma sat up straight, her hands clasped together, trying to stay calm. Daniel, on the other hand, leaned back in his chair, his expression leisurely as if he had the upper hand. He glanced over, his eyes flashing with mockery. He leaned over, lowering his voice enough for only Emma to hear. "I don't need your love. I just need Lily to keep up my image." Emma was stunned. In that moment, she heard the stark truth. This war had never been about fatherhood, and certainly not about a daughter. For Daniel, Lily's custody was just a pawn, to maintain the facade of a devoted father, to protect his perfect image in the eyes of society and business partners. Emma looked straight at her ex-husband, tears welling up, but her voice was stiff. "She is not my tool," Daniel chuckled, leaned back, and replied calmly. "In this world, Emma, everything is a tool, even people." That sentence made Emma tremble, but also ignited a fierce fire in her. If before she fought for herself, then at this moment she knew she had to fight to the end, to protect Lily from becoming a shield for Daniel's ambition and fame. Rumors also began to spread. On social networks, anonymous posts appeared describing Emma as an irresponsible mother, not knowing how to take care of her child, always leaving her child at home to go out with friends. Emma bit her lip, trembling with anger. She had never stepped foot in a bar in her life or neglected Lily for a minute. But in the virtual world, lies spread faster than the truth. One afternoon, Emma went to pick up Lily from school and saw a few parents whispering behind her back, their eyes scrutinizing her. She hugged her daughter tighter, clearly feeling that this battle was not only taking place in the courtroom, but also in the eyes of society. One morning at the beginning of the week, Emma received a call from the school office. The secretary's voice hesitated. "Your bear!" "Miss Reynolds, the principal wants to talk to you about Lily." Emma's heart ached. She quickly asked for a leave of absence to run to school. In the principal's office, Mrs. Pruvy. Johnson, a stern middle-aged woman, looked at Emma with eyes that were both worried and concerned. Miss Reynolds, recently some parents have reported that Lily has shown signs of mental instability. They think family matters have negatively affected her. Emma was speechless. She sank into her chair, her hands clenched so tightly that her knuckles turned white. No, no way. I've always been there for her. I've never left her alone in this. The principal sighed softly, his voice slow. I understand, but this information spreads quite quickly. Some people even said that Lily cried, saying that her mother would leave. You know, rumors in the parent community are hard to control. In that moment, Emma suddenly understood. It was Daniel. Only he could have planted that half-true, half-false story in other people's ears. He not only wanted to break Emma in court, but also wanted to turn the school, a place that should have been safe for Lily, into another arena to smear the child's mother. Emma walked out of the office with trembling legs. On the schoolyard, Lily was playing with her friends, her smile bright and innocent. But to Emma, that smile suddenly became painfully fragile. She knew that if Daniel continued to manipulate her, the world around her daughter would gradually become colored with lies. After the shock of discovering an empty USB, Michael did not rush to ignore it. He brought it to an IT expert who had collaborated on many cases. A week later, meeting again in a small office, the room lit by the light of a computer screen, Emma sat silently, her heart pounding, waiting for the results. The expert typed a few commands. The screen flashed and then showed a string of messy data. He looked up, his voice firm. The data used to exist here, and I found traces that showed it was deleted remotely through an internet connection. Emma's eyes widened. You mean someone got into the USB even when it was in my hands? The expert nodded slightly. D! Michael sat motionless for a few seconds, then frowned, his hands clasped together. He said, his voice low and cold, Yeah! This is not a rookie's game. Someone has the skills and access. Emma shivered. A cold chill ran down her spine. She suddenly realized that this was no longer just a fight between a broken couple. Behind Daniel, there might be a force powerful enough to interfere with the legal evidence, even clean up the evidence before it could reach court. The silence in the room stretched out like a suffocation. Michael folded the file, looking at Emma with a gaze that was both determined and worried. We're not just playing against Daniel, Emma. We're playing against a much larger chessboard. Emma sat there, her hands clenched into fists. Fear shone in her eyes, but also a new spark. If there was a force behind it, then the truth needed to be exposed more than ever. In a rare gathering with both families, the atmosphere was as tense as a broken string. Daniel's mother, with a disdainful voice, turned to her son. Stop! She was never good enough for you, Daniel. I told you from the beginning. Emma turned pale, but before she could say anything, her father slammed the table, his eyes bloodshot. At least she loved your son when he had nothing. The room was silent, except for the sound of heavy breathing. Those words were not just a rebuttal, but also the naked truth. Emma had been with Daniel since the days when he was just an unknown real estate broker. Now that Daniel had succeeded, all Emma received in return was contempt. Emma returned home, closed the door, and sat alone in the dark. In her hands, the scant evidence was like ashes. The witnesses turned their backs, and the vicious rumors covered everything. Despair rose, but right in that abyss, a thought flashed. If everything was against her, then the only way was to fight to the end to regain the truth. She remembered Michael's words at the end of their first meeting. Days. In divorce, truth is the first victim. Emma understood that the truth had been distorted from the very beginning. But that was why she had to be even stronger, so that at least Lily would know where the darkness was and where the light was. Late one night, after a long session with the lawyer, Emma returned to her parents' house to pick up Lily. In the dimly lit living room, David, Emma's younger brother, was waiting. He had been a strong supporter of his sister from the beginning, always affirming, You have to fight. Daniel cannot take Lily away. But tonight, David's eyes were sad, his voice lowered. Emma, have you thought about stopping? Or give up to keep Lily safe? Emma paused, looking at her brother in shock. She shook her head, her voice choked. Do you also think I'm not worthy of being a mother? After all, even you believe those lies? David sighed, scratching his head and pulling his hair. No, I never doubted you. But I'm afraid that if this continues, Lily will be the one hurt the most. Daniel has power, money. As for you, you only have love. Sometimes, love is not enough. Emma was silent, her heart aching. That sentence, though full of worry, was still like an unintentional knife from her own flesh and blood. She felt the walls around her closing in. Witnesses turned their backs, friends betrayed her, society believed in rumors, and now, even her brother, her only support, was shaken. Emma stepped out onto the porch, taking a deep breath to hold back her tears. A bitter thought echoed in her mind. When even my own blood advises me to give up, who else will stand by me but Lily? She looked at her daughter's window where Lily was sleeping soundly, her face peaceful. And at that moment, Emma knew, even if the whole world turned its back on her, she still couldn't give up. That morning, the sky was gray. The clouds were thick like a curtain covering the city. Emma walked into the courthouse with heavy feet, holding her old handbag tightly in her hand. On the other side, Daniel appeared in a neat suit, walking straight, his face cold. Reporters took pictures continuously. Flashbulbs flashed like hundreds of light knives cutting the air. The courtroom was packed. White light penetrated through the tall glass windows, clearly illuminating every tiny dust particle flying in the dense space. The judge's hammer rang out, cutting off all the whispers. All eyes immediately turned to the two people who had sworn to love each other, now facing each other like enemies. Daniel's lawyer stood up, his voice cold. "Mrs. Reynolds, isn't it true you once shouted at your daughter in anger?" Emma sat on the witness stand, her hands clenched, taking a deep breath. Her voice was choked but firm. "I'm human. I was exhausted, not absent." The whole courtroom was in an uproar. Lawyer Daniel immediately objected, trying to paint Emma as an erratic, irritable mother who lacked the patience to raise her child. Emma lowered her head, but her eyes flashed with resistance. "Michael," Emma's lawyer, stood up, vehemently objecting. "Objection, Your Honor. The question is misleading." The judge nodded. "Sustained. Please move on." The trial was at its most tense. Daniel's lawyer kept pressing, turning each word upside down, trying to prove that Emma was an unstable mother. Emma sat on the witness stand, her hands clenched, tears welling up. Suddenly, from the back row, a sob broke out. Everyone turned around. Lily, a 7-year-old girl with messy blonde hair, had jumped up. Her eyes were glistening with tears, her lips trembling. "Stop it!" the little girl screamed, her voice broken by tears. The whole courtroom was stunned. Lily rushed forward, her sobbing voice echoing in the cold space. "I just want Mommy to stay with me. I don't want to live without her." The child's cry tore through the solemn atmosphere. A few jurors bent down to wipe their eyes. The whole courtroom was silent, only the sound of sobbing echoed. Emma was stunned. She stood up, opened her arms to welcome her child. Lily hugged her mother tightly, her face buried in Emma's chest, sobbing. The mother trembled, her hands holding her child tightly as if afraid someone would snatch her away. The judge banged his gavel repeatedly to demand order, but his voice was also low and heavy. No one in the room could ignore the truth. Amid the arguments about finances, witnesses, and documents, Lily's crying was the most convincing proof of what the child really needed. Michael leaned over and said to Emma, his voice filled with emotion, "That's the strongest testimony we have." Just when it seemed like everything was against Emma, Shall's voice suddenly rang out from the back row. "I have something to say." Everyone turned. It was Maria, the former maid who had changed her testimony after receiving money from Daniel. She stepped up to the podium, her hands shaking but her eyes filled with determination. "Yes, Daniel often leaves Lily alone at night." "Hey, I can't keep quiet any longer. That child doesn't deserve to be left like that." The courtroom fell silent. Daniel's face paled, his lawyer quickly stood up to protest, but Maria's words planted seeds of doubt in the jury's minds. Michael held out a stack of documents, his voice echoing in the dead silence. "Your Honor, this is evidence that Mr. Daniel Collins has been hiding a huge debt for many years. He has been transferring money to different accounts to hide the truth, while constantly blaming his wife for not contributing to the family." Emma sat there, tears streaming down her face, but the corners of her lips trembled into a slight smile. Finally, the truth was revealed. "Ooh," Daniel gritted his teeth, trying to stay calm, but the sweat on his forehead betrayed his tension. When the atmosphere in the courtroom was still as tense as a string after the confrontation, Michael suddenly stood up. He walked slowly to the podium holding a stack of printed papers, his voice clear. "Your Honor, I would like to present new evidence. A printout of text messages between Mr. Daniel Collins and a business partner, legally obtained from phone records." He held up the paper so that the light could clearly see the words. "Once the custody is mine, she won't stand a chance in court." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Michael paused for a few seconds, then looked straight at the jury, his voice dropping. "These words are not about love, nor are they about the responsibility of a father. These are the words of a man who sees custody as a shield, a weapon in his personal power game." Emma sat in the plaintiff's chair, tears streaming down her face. She didn't need to say anything more because those cold words had revealed the truth for her. Daniel's face was pale. He bit his lip, trying to keep his composure, but his hands were shaking. His lawyer stammered in protest, but the judge frowned, quickly making a note on the file. "Guy!" The jury was silent, but the way they looked at Daniel had changed. It was no longer the look of a person, a model father, but for a man who was turning his own daughter into a pawn in a game of power. The atmosphere in the courtroom calmed after the series of tense evidence. Michael stood up, slowly approaching the witness stand where Daniel was sitting. He did not need to raise his voice, just asked a simple question, his voice even but sharp as a knife. "Mr. Collins, can you name the last book you read to your daughter before bed?" Daniel paused. His face changed color, his eyes darting around, searching for an answer. The seconds seemed endless. Sweat began to form on his forehead, his lips moved, but no sound came out. The jury watched, absolutely silent. The room waited, but there was no answer. Emma sat on the other side, silently looking at her ex-husband. In that moment, she no longer saw the model father he had always portrayed himself to be, but only emptiness, a man who had never really been present in the simplest things of his child's life. Michael nodded slightly, turned around and said to the judge, "Aye." No further questions. At that moment, without any further evidence, the whole courtroom understood. Daniel could talk about money, contracts, honor, but he could not talk about a bedtime story with his daughter, and that truth was even more powerful than any accusation. When pressed by Michael's series of questions, Daniel lost his patience, his voice harsh. "I couldn't let her ruin everything I built." The courtroom fell silent. "Show!" Those words, unintentionally but like a confession, showed that he saw his marriage as a personal project to protect, not a family home. Emma looked at Daniel, her eyes red but bright. In that moment, she knew she had the truth. Just when the courtroom seemed to have reached a climax, the door opened. A woman walked in, thin, wearing thick glasses, holding a large file. Michael recognized her immediately. It was Sarah Mitchell, Daniel's former accountant. She went straight to the witness stand, her voice trembling but clear. "I used to manage Mr. Collins's accounts. Here are the statements showing that he transferred money overseas to hide bad debts and create the perfect cover." The room was in an uproar. The judge banged his gavel to demand order. Sarah continued, looking straight at Daniel. "Oh, I also heard him say, once I get full custody, she'll have nothing to fight me with." Michael briefly introduced himself, then asked, "Ms. Mitchell, apart from the transaction statement that was submitted to the court, did you discover anything else related to Mr. Collins's assets?" Sarah opened the file, took out a photocopy of the contract. Her voice was even but firm. "This is a contract to buy an apartment in Miami, not only in the name of Mr. Daniel Collins, but also with a co-owner, Sofia Alvarez." The courtroom exploded. Whispers spread throughout the rows of seats. Emma was stunned. Her hands clenched the edge of her chair. Sarah continued, "During the process, I heard Mr. Collins himself say that this apartment needed to be kept out of his wife's sight. I kept the copy in case I was asked to destroy the data." The judge frowned, banged his gavel to demand order, but could not stop the shock. Daniel paled, tried to keep calm, but his voice was broken. That's a private investment. It has nothing to do with this case." Michael immediately interrupted. His voice was sharp. "On the contrary, Your Honor, it proves that Mr. Collins not only betrayed his marriage, but also lived a double life financially, hiding the family's common assets and using them for outside relationships." The jury took notes. Some looked at Daniel with cold eyes. Meanwhile, Emma just silently bowed her head, tears welling up, not because of the pain, but because the truth had finally been fully revealed. A wave of whispers broke out violently. "Stalk!" Emma held her breath. "Shh." Michael held her hand tightly under the table, whispering, "This is the moment we need." Daniel sat there, his face red and pale. His lawyer stood up, protesting quickly, but the truth echoed loudly in the courtroom. The tension was at its peak. The jury exchanged glances, taking notes. Emma sat there, feeling the sweat trickle down her spine, but her heart filled with hope for the first time in months. Michael stood up, closing with a sharp sentence. "Custody isn't about possession, it's about presence. Custody isn't about keeping a child, it's about ensuring that the child is truly loved and cared for." The room was silent. The room was silent. All eyes were on the judge. Emma took a deep breath, tears streaming down her face, waiting for the fateful moment. At lunchtime, when the parties left the courtroom corridor immediately became chaotic. Dozens of reporters jostled each other, microphones and cameras raised high, flashbulbs flashing. Daniel walked out with his lawyer, keeping a calm face but his shoulders tense. Suddenly, a young reporter stood up from the crowd, his voice resounding throughout the corridor. "Mr. Collins, is it true that you used the company to hide your debts?" The question echoed like a gunshot. The corridor was silent. The scene lasted for a few seconds, then a chaotic shout broke out. The other reporters pressed their microphones together. "What do you explain about the statement of money transfer abroad? Did you use your child custody rights to maintain your image as a successful businessman?" Daniel was startled. His face changed color. His lawyer quickly raised his hand to shield himself, pushed the crowd away, and growled, "No comments. Please step aside." Security personnel rushed over, pulling the reporter who caused the chaos out. But in just a few short seconds, the news was transmitted. The camera captured the moment. Daniel was confused, sweat on his forehead, his eyes evasive. When he returned to the courtroom, the atmosphere was different. The jury, who were supposed to be neutral, could not completely erase the aftertaste of the event that had just happened. They exchanged glances. Some shook their heads slightly. Not only Emma, but also, public opinion outside was starting to change. Emma sat still, her hands trembling on the table. For the first time, she felt an invisible force on her side, not money or power, but the light of truth slowly being revealed to the public. The courtroom fell silent as the judge returned to the stand. The jury was seated, their faces solemn. Emma clenched her hands, feeling as if the blood had stopped flowing. Daniel tried to keep his face calm, but the beads of sweat on his temples betrayed his tension. The gavel rang out, loudly. Custody of the child, Lily Collins, is hereby granted to Mr. Daniel Collins. Mrs. Spire, Emma Reynolds is granted periodic visitation, as determined by the court. Emma's world seemed to collapse under her feet. Her eyes widened, tears streaming down her face, her body shaking so much that she almost collapsed from the chair. Michael quickly reached out to support her, whispering, "Emma, calm down." But her heart was broken. All the months of fighting, the evidence, the witnesses, in the end, just one angry sentence crushed everything. On the other side, Daniel sat motionless, his face cold. He tried to appear victorious, but his clenched hands on his lap were shaking uncontrollably. His eyes were averted, as if he himself could not believe the verdict he had just won. In his statement, the judge emphasized, "The jury takes special note of Mrs. Bruve." Reynolds' statement during an argument, "You never did anything for this family." This statement is considered to be an expression of her lack of responsibility and contribution to the marriage. Emma was stunned. A statement made in desperation, meant only for protest, had now become a legal weapon that cost her custody of her child. As the courtroom closed, the crowd began to leave. The sound of shoes clicking on the tiled floor, the whispers of the press in the hallway drifted in. In the family section, Daniel's mother raised her head, the corner of her lips curled into a satisfied smile. She leaned toward her son, whispering, loud enough for Emma to hear, "Finally, justice!" The hissed tone made Emma feel like a knife was being twisted into a wound that had not yet healed. In her eyes, victory was not only the right to raise Lily, but also the humiliation Emma had to endure. In complete contrast, Emma's father stood up quietly. The man with silver hair and red eyes walked out of the courtroom with a heavy gait. He did not look at anyone, only mumbled, as if talking to himself. They punished her for loving too much. Emma heard it, her heart clenched. In a brief moment, she realized that her pain was no longer a personal burden. Her father, the man who had witnessed his gentle, devoted daughter for so many years, now had to bow his head helplessly before a cold sentence. That scene created two distinct opposites. One side was elated as if they had just won, the other side quietly left with a bleeding heart. And in the middle, Emma sat there, exhausted, carrying the bitterness of a mother who lost her child. As soon as the trial ended, Emma stood up and rushed to Lily. She knelt down, her trembling arms holding her little daughter. "Eeh!" The warmth from her small body made Emma choke, tears wetting her hair. "Mommy, don't cry." Lily whispered, her voice trembling innocently. Her tiny hands gently stroked her mother's face. "Wow!" "I'll always draw us together." "Surfest!" Emma paused, looking at her child in tears. In her mind appeared the pictures Lily often drew, a house, parents and daughter holding hands. Simple, innocent, and now those pictures would be the only fragile thread connecting mother and daughter. She hugged Lily tighter, as if she let go, the world would be forever separated. But the court officer stepped forward, polite but firm. "Time's up. The child has to go with Mr. Collins now." Emma burst into tears, her arms pulled away, while Lily tried to reach for her mother, her eyes panicked. "Call him Mommy!" echoed throughout the hallway, tearing the hearts of everyone who witnessed it. The entire auditorium fell silent. A few reporters lowered their cameras, not wanting to take another frame. This was no longer a legal matter, no longer a matter of winning or losing. It was a naked cut into the mother-child bond. Emma collapsed, hugging the empty space in her arms. In her head echoed her daughter's words, "I'll always draw us together." And that innocent sentence became a silent oath, forcing Emma to continue fighting so that one day, the family picture that Lily painted would no longer be just a dream. The courtroom door opened, and Daniel strode out in a neat suit, his face cold as a victor. The press immediately rushed in, microphones and cameras raised high, flashbulbs flashing. A chaotic shout echoed throughout the hallway. "Mr. Collins, can you share your feelings after the trial? How do you intend to prove that you are a good father?" Daniel raised his head, preparing to utter empty words about responsibility and justice when a young reporter pushed forward, loudly asking, "You won custody of the child, but did you win her love?" The question fell on the crowded hallway like a bomb. The noise suddenly stopped for a few seconds. Daniel paused for a moment. "Oi!" His facial muscles stiffened, his eyes blinked rapidly, his hands gripped the briefcase so tightly that his knuckles turned white. In that moment, all the false confidence suddenly shattered, revealing the emptiness inside. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. The camera panned to that confused face, capturing the moment when the winner could not answer the simplest question. After a few seconds of silence, his personal lawyer quickly intervened, pushing the reporters away, repeating, "No comments." But it was too late. In the eyes of the crowd, Daniel may have won legally, but emotionally he had lost completely. Because a real father never has to be embarrassed by the question, "Does my child love me?" Emma stood from afar, watching the scene through the circle of reporters. Her heart still ached, but in a flash she understood. Daniel's victory was just an empty shell, and sooner or later the truth would swallow him whole. That same afternoon, the newspapers all ran headlines. "Mother loses custody over one sentence." A mother loses custody of her child because of one sentence. Social media exploded with controversy. Some sympathized with Emma, thinking the court was too harsh. Others said, "How can a mother say such a sentence?" Emma silently read each comment, as if thousands of needles were stabbing her heart. She had never felt so alone. Losing her husband, losing her child, and now losing even the fair view of society. But in the midst of her despair, a detail flashed in Emma's mind. The financial documents had not been turned to the end. She clearly remembered Daniel dodging when asked about the huge debt. The verdict might be a failure, but deep down Emma knew the financial war had just begun. Michael looked at her, his voice low. "We will not stop here. There are many things that have not come to light." As Emma left the courthouse, her steps heavy, her phone rang. A text message from an unknown number appeared, accompanied by a photo of Lily playing in the schoolyard. Scrawled beneath the photo were the words, "Your daughter deserves better. Keep digging." Emma was stunned, her hands shaking. Who had sent this message? Well, Wei? A mysterious ally? Or someone else using Lily to force her to continue the fight? No one in the press corps pushing and shoving outside the gate knew what Emma had just received. But a glimmer of light flashed in her eyes, amidst the tears. The court might have taken custody of her daughter away from her, but the real battle was not over. That night, after the trial, Emma sat with Michael in his small office. On the table were piles of messy files, the evidence that had been presented, the statements Sarah had provided. The yellow light of the desk lamp cast a tired, haggard look on Emma's face. Michael flipped through the pages, his cold eyes still focused as if he could not bear to miss even the smallest detail. Suddenly he stopped. At the end of a document there was a crumpled page, seemingly tucked away and unnoticed by anyone. Michael carefully spread it out. "Oh!" On it was a detailed list of bank transactions. The words were small, but the numbers were clear. Hundreds of thousands of dollars were transferred regularly from an account in Miami to a strange company called Orion Holdings, LLC. Emma frowned, her voice trembling. "Oh. Orion Holdings? I have never heard Daniel mention this name." Michael tapped his pen on the table, his eyes darkening. "It does not exist in a legal business system. This is a ghost company." The room fell silent. Emma felt a chill down her spine. She understood. The custody lawsuit was just a cover, and behind it was a dark financial maze. Daniel did not just want to steal Lily to save his reputation, he was also hiding a large-scale financial conspiracy, possibly involving other forces. Michael looked up, his voice low but firm. "Emma, I think we have just entered a much larger battle, not just marital, but financial, even criminal." Emma was silent, her hands clenched around the edge of the table. In the midst of her pain and defeat, another ray of light shone. She still had a way to fight, this time not just for herself, but for the hidden truth. The courtroom was behind her now, but its echoes followed Emma wherever she went. Each step out of that building had felt like walking through quicksand, every breath heavy, every sound muffled by the pounding of her own heart. She had lost the daily presence of Lily, the warmth of small arms around her at bedtime, the simple joy of hearing "Mommy" when she opened the door after work. Yet she also felt a strange kind of relief. Her daughter was safe, not swallowed by some unknown danger. Safety was the only consolation she had left. "Show!" Still, relief was not peace. Peace had been stolen the moment the judge's gavel fell. Nights became the hardest. Emma would lie awake in her half-empty apartment, the silence pressing against her ribs like iron bars. Sometimes she could almost hear Lily's laughter echoing in the corners of the room, ghostly and fragile. She held on to the memory of her daughter's whisper. "Mommy, don't cry. I'll always draw us together." That single sentence, born of a child's innocence, became Emma's quiet vow. As the days passed, Emma's grief began to reshape itself into something sharper. Pain was no longer a weight, but a blade. She began to see clearly what had been obscured during the trial. This was never just about marriage, never just about custody. It was about power, about control, about a system that could punish a woman for one sentence spoken in exhaustion while ignoring years of silent devotion. She wrote the words down in her journal one night, her hand trembling but firm. Justice in marriage isn't about revenge. It's about finding yourself again in the ruins. That was the truth she carried forward. Revenge would not bring her daughter back, but finding herself, her voice, her strength, just might. One late evening, as Emma returned home, she noticed something at her doorstep. A plain envelope, unmarked. For a moment she froze, her breath shallow, a chill running down her spine. With trembling fingers, she picked it up and tore it open. Inside was a photocopy of a bank statement. Daniel's name was right there, bold on the page, tied to transfers she had never known existed. And scrawled across the bottom, in jagged handwriting, were the words, "Emma, if you want your children back, follow the money." Her stomach twisted. Whoever sent this knew something and wanted her to dig deeper. She thought that was all, until a thinner sheet slipped out from behind the statement. It was a list of names. All women. Next to each name, a single word. Custody lost. Emma's hand shook violently as her eyes ran down the page. They were all women who had once been connected to Daniel in some way. Women who had stood where she stood, who had walked into courtrooms thinking they were fighting for their children, only to walk out stripped of them. Her knees nearly gave way as she whispered to the empty room. So, I wasn't the first. The realization hit like a tidal wave. Dot! Daniel wasn't just a husband turned cruel. He was a manipulator. A repeat offender, maybe even part of something larger, a network, a pattern, a system where women like her were deliberately broken, silenced, erased from their children's lives. Emma folded the papers back into the envelope, clutching it to her chest as though it contained both poison and salvation. For the first time since the verdict, her tears stopped. Instead, her eyes hardened with a quiet, fiery resolve. She whispered into the dark, "Ah!" Silence only feeds injustice. Facing it is the only way to be free. And with that, Emma understood. Her battle in court had ended, but a greater war was only just beginning.